Hi, my name is Davis. This is my Critical Lens expert summary. So, the way that Milkman and Guitar internalize or process their childhood traumas, Oedipal relationships, and the gruesome death of Guitar's father um, has a large influence on the people they become later in life. The difference in these characters represents how trauma can shape or define people based on the way it causes them to internalize the trauma and fruitlessly seek to rectify it, causing them to live an unfulfilled life. So one event in the book where this theme is developed is in the quote on page 78 when Milkman remembers his trauma. So it starts, quote, "My mother nursed me when I was old enough to talk, stand up, and wear knickers, and somebody saw it and laughed, and that's why they call me Milkman, and that's why my father never does it, and that's why my mother never does, but everyone else does. How did I forget that?" Milkman was born into a family where strong emotions kind of ruled and fueled the dynamic between his mother and father. This blade lock between his parents is what causes Ruth, Milkman's mother, to resort to using a young, naive Milkman as a vice for her inability to receive physical affection from her husband. And her actions, led by the strong emotions of desire and indignation, traumatizes Milkman to a point where he represses his memory of this event. The recovery of this memory, however, is what leads Milkman to begin to realize that strong emotions have only caused him problems. This is kind of spelled out when Milkman is fantasizing about what he's going to do with his money. Toni Morrison states that Milkman avoided commitment and strong feelings. He shied away from decisions. He wanted to know as little as possible, to feel only enough to get through the day admirably, and to be interesting enough to warrant the curiosity of other people, but not their all-consuming devotion. So he learns that the problems that he has faced at home were caused by strong emotions. So Ruth's relationship with him and his parents' relationship were all caused by strong emotions, which is why he lives this life trying to balance out the effect of those powerful feelings he felt a lot of in his childhood, which later traumatized him. So the pursuit of this leads him to become an apathetic and selfish person. Milkman's aversion to strong emotions due to his trauma and following character development shows how a trauma can severely impact a person due to their internalization of the event and the subconscious desire to be rid of the ideas they associate with it. So you can see this in Milkman when since he strongly affiliates strong emotions with his trauma, he tries to live his life separate from those strong emotions to kind of balance that out. And you can see how another way that this theme is developed is through Guitar. During Guitar's trauma, he kind of the opposite of Milkman, and I'll get into that. So when Milkman and Guitar are discussing Guitar's involvement in the 7 days, Milkman kind of accuses him of being mad and angry, and Guitar says that it's more out of love. And he states, no love. Didn't you hear me? What I'm doing ain't about hating white people. It's about loving us, about loving you. My whole life is love." And then Milkman says, "Man, you're confused." And Guitar replies, "Am I? When those concentration camp Jews hunt down Nazis, are they hating Nazis or loving dead Jews?" That's on page 159. So Guitar, kind of in the opposite of Milkman, exists on the opposite side of the trauma coin, I guess. While Milkman felt too much emotion surrounding his trauma, Guitar didn't feel any or enough. So that's why he tries to live his life seeking more of it. When Guitar's father died, his family seemed to move on almost immediately. His father's boss paid his mother $40 as condolence, and then she and his siblings happily accepted that money and then used it. This lack of emotion that he associates with his trauma is the reason why he feels the need to define himself by using these emotions. His love for his family, his friends, and his people, African Americans, are what his involvement in the 7 days represents. So Guitar's trauma left him to feel angry or upset that no one seemed to care about the death of his father, which he still feels later with the deaths of the African Americans that are happening in his community, and that's why he joins the 7 days. So he is fighting to avenge the unsung death of African Americans, since his father's death was noted with only $40. And a peppermint stick, I guess. This pursuit of bringing strong emotions, such as love, into his life is what makes him a passionate and selfish person. So Guitar's use of emotion and the way he defines himself is what connects him to my main theme, is because he associates with a lack of emotions during his trauma, and he subconsciously seeks out more emotions, which you can see in the fact that in the quote, it starts with, "It was the fact that instead of life insurance, the sawmill owner gave his mother $40 to tide you and them kids over, and she took it happily and bought each of them a peppermint stick. On the very day of the funeral, Guitar's two sister and baby brother sucked away at the bone white and blood red stick, but Guitar couldn't. He held it in his hand until it stuck there." So you can see how during his father's death, which he regards as a very traumatic event, nobody seemed to really care about the death. Rather, they just focused on the $40. And this lack of emotion and sympathy and like upsetness and anger about his father's death is what causes him to associate very strongly later on in life with strong emotions. So the two differences, these differences in Guitar and Milkman is what represents them as foils, firstly, and in addition shows how a trauma, even though these people are from very similar places, shows how trauma can greatly affect how they develop, because they're very different now. So you can see this in the quote, how Guitar allowed, it starts off on page 179, starts, quote, "Guitar allowed himself the pleasure of waking up old dreams, what he would buy for his grandmother and her brother, Uncle Billy, the one who had come up from Florida to help raise them all after his father died. The marker he would buy for his father's grave, pink lilies carved on it. Then stuff for his brothers and sisters, and his sisters' children. Milkman fantasized too, but not for the stationary things Guitar's described. Milkman wanted boats, cars, airplanes, and the command of a large crew." So that's on page 179. So Milkman's and Guitar's desires are inherently opposed. Guitar seeks to support his family out of love and gratitude, and Milkman only seeks to elevate himself. This blatant difference in character is one of the best examples in the text on how each individual trauma plays a fundamental role in how they develop as people, for the reasons I stated before. Because of the amount of emotion, I guess, is one example of how trauma can affect how they develop, but that's how it developed in this text specifically. So in conclusion, the difference between Milkman and Guitar depicts how traumatic events have the ability to shape or define people based on the way they internalize it and fruitlessly seek to rectify it, causing them to live an unfulfilled life.